For a reaction to the president's remarks and the threat contained therein and what happens next about Iraq, we're joined now by Senator Russ Feingold, Democrat of Wisconsin. Good evening, Senator. Thanks for your time.
Good evening, Keith. Great to be on the show.
Now, I'll get to the specifics of this in a moment, but give me your overall reaction here first. I mean, it seems hard to be surprised by this president anymore, but did he go above and beyond something today?
Well, it's just incredible to me that the President of the United States is planning on vetoing a bill that actually provides the funds that he wants for this next phase of the war. And the reason is that he thinks he shouldn't have to follow the will of the American people, which was expressed in November, and that is that somehow this war has to start to end. The bill is a very reasonable approach, and the President is being beyond stubborn in saying that we have to provide the funds and have no reaction at all to the fact that the people of this country want us out of this war. It's incredible to me that the President is this detached from reality.
He referred to, in this news conference, in some of the questions, some who believe our strategy there is not working, a group who believes that we should not be there in the first place. Is it possible, do you think, Senator, that the President does not realize that this group of some people constitutes about 7 out of every 10 Americans?
Well, he must know at some level, but he refers to the fact that we're back in our states listening to the people in our states as a vacation. Well, he needs a vacation like that, or he needs to get back onto a place like Wisconsin and the rural areas where I am this week, Keith, doing town meetings where people are telling me, for God's sakes, when are you going to get out of there? How can you possibly have this thing continue? What is the President thinking? He is truly out of touch with the people of this country. This is not a position of a few people in the Democratic Party. It is virtually a consensus of the American people that we have got to have an orderly end to this war, safely redeploy the troops in the next few months.
How do we affect that, sir? How do we get that done if the President is going to be in this form of obstinance and denial?
Sadly, it requires what we've been doing in the Senate and even more, and that means constantly ratcheting up the pressure. We first indicated that obviously this surge was a bad idea, and then we tried to pass a resolution having to do with some kind of a plan to end the war, and that didn't work. And so we did succeed last week in passing in the Senate on a bipartisan basis a timeline. You may remember that when I proposed the timeline first in August of 2005, people acted like it was a crazy idea. Now the President sees a majority of both houses are for it. But ultimately, Keith, if he ignores all of this, we have to use our power, our constitutional power, the power of the purse to say, all right, by this definite date, the funding will end. By that time, the troops will have been safely redeployed, and only after that would the funding end. But Senator Harry Reid and I have concluded that a bill or an amendment that would make that date a year from now, March 31st, 2008, is the next step, if necessary, if he truly does veto the supplemental bill.
To the power of the purse, for all the President's talk of alleged irresponsibility on the part of Congress in his news event this morning, it would seem in his answer to that question about the power of the purse, the President was forced to admit that what you and your colleagues are doing is, in fact, entirely legitimate. And if that's true, and he says it's true, doesn't that make his veto the cause of any interruption of funding for the troops in the unlikely event that happens?
Absolutely, Keith. Unless we've shifted into a monarchy, the whole idea of our system is that these powers are divided. And the President's the commander-in-chief, but the Congress is given the power of the funding, the appropriations power. We had to provide the funding in the first place, and if we decide this war is a bad idea, which I think just about everybody's concluded, then it's not just our right, but our responsibility to say, well, by X date, we will no longer do the funding. And if you can ask Republican senators who say this is a bad idea, why did they vote for a date to cut off the funding for Somalia in the early 90s? Remember Black Hawk Down? We lost those 18 brave Americans, and we said, this isn't working out very well. We ought to stop this. And so John McCain and John Warner and all of us voted for a date certain by which the troops were safely redeployed, and at the end of it, the funding was cut off. They've already voted for this approach. It's not extreme. It's right in the absolute core of our constitutional powers and our responsibilities as members of Congress.
Senator, President Bush also talked this morning about the consequences of failure in Iraq and that we would be forgetting the lessons of 9/11, that al-Qaeda was able to operate in a failed state, and the failed state in Iraq would somehow be your fault. I'm missing something in the logical chain there. Do you know what it is?
Well, the consequences of failure are what this administration has brought us. The failure to properly read the threat after 9/11, the failure to admit that they had us invade a country that wasn't even on their list of 45 countries where al-Qaeda was operating. This was the failure. This is the disaster. And we can still correct it if we can have a safe and orderly withdrawal from Iraq, so we can focus on places all the way from Afghanistan to Indonesia to northern Africa to Somalia. This is a worldwide threat. Why would you put 95% of your resources in one place where we're clearly being hurt and losing ground, when you could use those same resources across the world with the cooperation with other countries to fight those that attacked us on 9/11? So, Keith, the failure is a failure of understanding and good strategy, and the failure is that of the George Bush administration.
Senator Russ Feingold, Democrat of Wisconsin. As always, Senator, our great thanks for your time.
Thank you.